نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره نتوب إليه نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كان مشركا اللهم صل على عبدك اللهم صل على عبدك الرسول يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته لا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Dear brothers and sisters, bear with me, I have kind of a cold, but I'm trying to make myself clear. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, of course, from all those things external that affect us. We also ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from those things internally that we do to ourselves that cause us problems. We seek His protection. One of the things that the Masjid As-Sabur has started has been a school from K to 8. And one of the benefits of the school starting is when we educate our children, most frequently what we do is we give our children off to someone else to teach them. And we may ask ourselves sometimes, why is European history taught so frequently? All of us who sit here now have come from all over the world. Syria, Lebanon, Pakistan, Turkey, Afghanistan, Somalia. Most of us know more about European history than we know about any of the histories of the people sitting right next to us. We teach our children, and they know more about Kate and William of England than they do about the great heroes of Afghanistan or other places. This is now African History Month, and many of us know more about the royal family than we do about the great leaders in African American history. I remind you, and I remind myself, that one of the reasons that many of us sit here right now are because of those contributions and sacrifices made 100 years ago by African Americans who become Muslims long before the other communities have begun to solidify. One person I could mention was William Blyden. I mention him because Blyden was operating in Africa, sent there by England and Europe to pull Africans away from Islam and into Christianity. Blyden went to Africa to accomplish this task, to move people from Islam, and what he began to realize was that the Muslims that he was encountering had a more decent lifestyle, were more decent to one another, had better human values than those people who were attracting them into Christianity. When we send our children off to be educated by others to teach them European history, European values, some of those values are very wonderful values. I was born in America, would not choose to live anywhere else. Nevertheless, the values are very malleable and they now begin to change. Those parents who don't teach their children about Muslim heroes will find that their children will know more about Harry Potter. And find that their children know more about Harry Potter than they'll know anything else. I seek refuge in Allah from misleading and from being misled, from betraying and from being betrayed into ignorance by others. I ask Allah to guide my heart, to guide my tongue. I declare belief in Allah, the Beneficent and Merciful. All praise be to Allah, who has created man and has not left him without guidance in the book of Allah and in the example of the messenger of Allah, Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who lived 1400 years ago, to whom the Quran was revealed. The images that our children now see on television and the things that they learn about Muslims are on the news. The news has never been more active in creating a negative impression about who and what we are. Our children learn certain things about African Americans, which are not true, which are stereotypes isolated to a small minority. but they also learn certain things about Muslims from Syria. They also learn certain things about Muslims from Iran. Violence, terrorism, cruelty to women. They learn about the revolutions on television. They go to school, and our children directly ask, how does it feel to be a terrorist? Is your father a terrorist? But we are blamed for that because we're not actively involved in teaching our children something else. The last time I addressed the community, I tried to remind us that when we study history, not Islamic history, not African American history, when these histories are put together, we get a much different picture. Our children begin to look at Syria, Lebanon, Jordan. Do they know about 1914, 1918, when these countries were created by another power system? These aren't countries. When they see these monsters who assassinate people in their own countries, who sit up on and call dictators, they call them Muslim dictators. Saddam Hussein, was he a Muslim dictator? He wasn't put there by Muslims. He was put there by the West. Put there by the Western powers for certain purposes. Assad in Syria, is he a Muslim dictator? Put there by the French. Our children know this? No, they know these people to be Muslims. And we teach them no different. Islam teaches balance in thought and action. Although some practitioners may go to extremes, the religion itself does not condone any form of extremism or fanaticism. In fact, finding the middle path is a general principle of behavior in Islam. The Quran and Sunnah contain specific guidelines, steering people away from extremes in particular cognitive, social, and behavioral areas. Furthermore, Islam endorses social, political, and economic systems that present a balanced middle ground. All of these things you can read in the book, but that's not the picture that's being projected. Do our children know about the Italians invading Somalia? Do they know about the Italians in Ethiopia? Do they know about the atrocities committed across this planet by Europe for 100 years, long before terrorism? One of the areas that I mentioned before, and I'll remind you and I remind myself, in 1921, we were taught as I grew up about the Tulsa, Oklahoma riots. There were no riots in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They were not riots. It was a butchery and a massacre that took place with some bombings from the air. How do you have a riot when people are dropping bombs on you from the air? That was May 31st, 1921. May 31st, 1921, in the Kurdish Mountains, Air Marshal Winston Churchill called in attacks on the Kurds in those mountains. Italy had its eyes on Ethiopia and Somalia. France had its eyes on Algeria. England had its eyes on Egypt, India. 1885, all of Africa was consumed in a bloodbath. In the Belgian Congo, Leopold alone killed 15 million Africans. Do our children know about these acts of terrorism? Or do they just think the only word that goes with terrorist is Muslim? Muslim. When they hear about crimes being committed in the street, drive-by shootings, do they only associate with this African Americans? Or do they understand the concept of drive-by bombings? How many people are killed now in drone attacks and the response is, oops, thought you were somebody else? Do we teach our children that? When our children look at Kate and William, the royal family, do they understand about Victoria, Elizabeth? Victoria through the 1900s, the atrocities committed upon the Asian people, the African people, South and Central American people. How does England get the Falkland Islands? We don't teach our children that. But we'll let them watch the news and tell them to be careful where you go because you have an assassinated people who can become very dangerous. African Americans. When we stand shoulder to shoulder and say stand shoulder to shoulder, toe to toe, take our brothers in our arms and say Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and squeeze them tight, do we mean it? Are they in our hearts once we leave the masjid? I stand here not because of any particular reason other than I love you. I love my brothers and I love my sisters, and I'm concerned about our children. When I say our children, I don't mean African American children or my children, our children, our community. Now we move into a society where certain things are all right. We see our young people now drinking Red Bulls and energy drinks at 12 and 13 years old. How can a young child need to have energy at 12 and 13 years old? What's going to happen to their energy level when they get to be 20 years old, 25 years old? Television at this day, I grew up when television was first put into the homes. From that period to now, television has moved from being entertainment to being masqueraded pornography. They have married television with the Marquise de Sade. They have married music with the Marquise de Sade. And they only isolate these things around certain people. So the Muslims from the Middle East are terrorists. They're violent. And the African Americans from the cities are dangerous. So we have to vote laws into place. Stand your ground, you can shoot them if you need to. If they frighten you, if they play their music too loud. Oh yes, we've allowed them to isolate us into different areas. Our children do not know the history of us. When we take each other in our arms and we call each other brothers, it's more than a word to call somebody your brother. It means they're in your heart and in your mind from the time you meet them to the time you see them again. Dear brothers and sisters, one of the defenses against some of these things is we have to purify the heart. Otherwise, everything is mechanical. Anybody can learn how to do this. Anybody can learn how to do that. That's a mechanical movement that is duplicatable, very simple. We have people now who place a great deal of emphasis on Arabic. Denzel Washington in the movie Malcolm X. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Very beautifully sung, recited. Didn't mean a bit of it. Didn't mean a bit of it. You can do it, you can recite it. Doesn't mean you mean it. Doesn't mean you feel it. You can say, Assalamu alaikum, brother. It doesn't mean you think this man is your brother. You don't know him, and you don't teach your children to know him. The extraordinary contributions made by Muslims across this planet have been obfuscated and hidden away. African American wrote a book called Stolen Legacies. And most people scoff, yeah, that's silly. You know, the Greeks stole the African cultures, histories, and so forth. They did the same thing to Muslims from across the planet. They stole the contributions of Islam. The Renaissance came on the backs of the contributions of Islam. And where did they get the contributions in science and medicine? They got them from Greece. And where did Greece get them from? Africa. Europe lays claim to them, and they most certainly benefit financially from it. More to the point, we don't educate our children. We don't strive to purify our own hearts. Jealousy, envy. If you learn something, brothers and sisters, for the sake of Allah, you make the best effort you can to learn Arabic, to learn the Deen, for the sake of Allah, to draw yourself and ourselves closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's blessings in it. If you learn Hadith, if you learn Arabic, if you learn whatever for the sake of turning people's faces to you, so that they'll think you're something special, it's only a wasted effort, it's a toxic effort. Especially if you're a husband, especially if you're a father. The teachings of Islam have their beauty and are cohesive, and in many cases have been taught in many different places. One example. Bruce Lee was asked once, what's the best defense if you're taken unawares? And he looked at the person who asked, he said, taken unawares, then you must not be a husband or a father. For a husband and a father can never, ever be taken unawares. Never think the door that you went in is the same door that you come out. Shadows have appeared. A husband and a father's mind is on his family. He is never taken unawares. How do we let our children fall into this gap of education? How do we let other people teach them the history of the world? Anybody who comes from another country and doesn't teach his family about Ethiopia, Somalia, and the tragedies that have put them on the path they're on now. You think Ethiopia and Somalia have gotten to the state of starvation and revolution organically? Oh no. Oh no. Do you think that the African Americans have come to this level of degradation they've come through in many areas and cities organically? Oh no. Native Americans? When they took the Native American's bow and they took his horse and they took his ability to feed his family, something he had done for 10,000 years. And they tell him, we'll bring you the food. We'll bring you the blankets. And his wife says, Chief, this is not going to last. These blankets are garbage and this food won't plant long enough. The seeds aren't even good. He says, what do you want me to do about it? If we run and get away, we'll starve. If we run, they'll catch us. Does it sound familiar? The welfare system. You remove the man from the house, make him unable to take care of his family. Make sure he cannot get a job. And if you don't have a job, you can't have a family, and the family can't have you in the house until you get a job. Reduce the male to being able to make a baby but not take care of a baby. You do this for 200 years, and you have a messed up group of people. Who teaches that? Starvation. Starvation where? Starvation where? In the wealthiest countries on earth. Wealthiest countries on earth. Trucks of diamonds, gold, cocoa, tin. You can't have computers or cell phones. You teach your children that? You can't have cell phones or computers if they don't bring it out of Congo. And what's happening in Congo? Starvation. Trillions of dollars roll by. Women rock their babies to sleep in their arms because they can't get a drink of water. Our children now are bored. Our children now have to have energy drinks, cell phones, laptops. But do they know where these components come from? No. They look at Kate and they look at William. William, who has never paid for a button on his jacket, never paid for a spool of thread. Their wealth has flowed from the bodies of people in Asia, Africa, and what they renamed the Middle East. We teach them what they did in Egypt. Egyptians teach them. We teach them what they did in India. Starvation. Keep the food on the boat and starve them to death. Don't teach them that. Dear brothers and sisters, our hearts have got to be purified. We have got to read our Quran every single day. Some read a little, some read a lot. Any day we don't read the Quran is a bad day. If you have time to take a jump shot, you got time to read. You see? Dear brothers and sisters, we have to purify ourselves so that we can help our young people to be better people than we are. Better people than we were. We must teach our young men that when you marry someone, sitting across the table from you is not just your wife. All the mysteries of the universe are contained right on the other side of that table. If you learn how to mind the company that you have, you will never be bored, nor will she. The Prophet Muhammad used to constantly talk about Khadijah. Aisha radiallahu anha finally got tired of hearing about Khadijah. Said, you got a younger wife now, a better wife. He remarked, younger, never better. He remarked how she wrapped him up, took care of him, protected him, made him feel comfortable when he was afraid. Later, the community came to Aisha and said, Aisha, what about your husband? What's he like when he's not with us? We know he's a great general. We know he's a great orator. He's Allah's prophet. What's he like when he's at home? You know what he's like when he's at home. He's the Quran. He's better than you know. We want our children to have that goal for their marriages when they become husbands and wives. We want for our grandchildren to say about their fathers, you wonder why I'm a Muslim? You talk about terrorists. If you had my father, my mother, you'd be a Muslim too. You had these examples, you'd be doing this too. We want our wives to have the ambition to have their husbands say for them if they're not present, you think my wife is a wonderful person? You don't have a clue. Vice versa, you think my husband was something special? I wish I could explain to you how special he was. These are goals for marriage. These are goals for being human beings. This takes brotherhood and elevates it above a cliche, a mechanical routine. The purification of the heart is the only thing that separates us from anyone else. And humanity needs us now. Without citing particular laws that are being passed, agendas that are being moved, it needs that middle community to give the example. Patience, piety, loving one another. One of the things we miss because we leave Juma so quickly is we don't know one another. We might find that the brothers and sisters that we sit next to and quick salams to, if we took the time to know them, we might find we like them. We might find this a person that we like and who can share something with us and he with them. We may be able to pass information off about our histories, about the cultures we come from. Something we can take back to our children and tell our children, I met someone from such and such a country. I had no idea that the place was like that. Dear brothers and sisters, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to love one another, to draw closer to one another, and to feel a camaraderie that exists beyond mechanical statements. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala al-kareem wa salim, Muhammadin Nabiyyin, Ummiyin wa ala alayhi wa salim, ajma'in, amma ba'd. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna 'alan nabi, ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa Ibrahim, Allahumma barik ala Muhammad, kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa Ibrahim, fil 'alamin innaka Hamidum Majid. Dear brothers and sisters, one of the things that we can try and do for our children is to teach them how to be more patient, how to use their time better. Talking to one of the brothers today, he reminded me that when we see certain deficiencies in brothers, we should not criticize them, we should pray for them. We have to really want for our brothers to have what we want. Many times we'll see brothers or sisters who have very gross shortcomings. And one of the things that we can do is remind ourselves that of all the shortcomings I have, because we all are fully aware of those that we have ourselves, we can still thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that at least you didn't give me those. At least you didn't make me that. And pray for them. Pray that they do better. These are all in keeping with the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who the Quran has told us, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. You have in the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a beautiful pattern of conduct for anyone whose hope is in Allah in the final day, and who engages much in the praise of Allah. Dear brothers and sisters, our children are gravitating now toward heroes. Everybody has heroes. Everyone has someone they look up to. Inshallah, Allah will raise us as the kind of fathers and grandfathers that they look up to us. That they see us as a model, not just for Muslims, but models for human beings. that they want to aspire to be that kind of human being. Whatever it took to make my father that, I'm going to do that. Whatever it was it took my mother to be that and to join them together as a company, to have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them as a union, to be these kind of people drawn together, that's what I want to do too. I want to have a companion. I want to have a friend. The Prophet Muhammad, his personality is all-encompassing. There is Muhammad the warrior, Muhammad the businessman, Muhammad the statesman, Muhammad the orator, Muhammad the reformer, Muhammad the refuge of orphans, Muhammad the protector of slaves, Muhammad the emancipator of women, Muhammad the judge, Muhammad the saint. In all of these activities, there is nothing that our children can aspire to do or to be in this life that the Prophet Muhammad is not the perfect model for them. Having done all of these different things, loved by his companions, loved by his wives, praised by those who he was with. One of the brothers gave us a wonderful hadith the other day. I hope I can remember it well enough. Zayd, the Prophet's young servant, said that one day he was given some money when he was a little boy to go make a purchase for the Prophet. He did not return. He didn't come back. So the Prophet went and looked for him. And he found him. He was playing. He asked him, "Did you get those things that I asked you to get?" And he at first felt this little brush on the back of his neck. He turned around and the Prophet Muhammad saw him. He said, "No, I didn't get it." He said, "Give me the money," and he went and got it. Many of us face that same situation, would chastise, punish, tell our children how you disappointed me, you haven't lived with your responsibility. We have given them something to make them remember that, always. How many of us have had parents who don't judge us, didn't judge us? Were always there to be like a bed for us, for a cushion, to remind us when we didn't do things right, in the gentlest way, who always allowed us to know protection is here, sanctuary is here. You must do certain things, but you always have my respect. To be raised by parents who don't judge us, who allow us to develop, who learn us. These are things that those of us who are older have to try and prepare our young people to see, so that they don't advance too far in age and leave behind a mess. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cautions us that when we are called and our life here is done, we will see what we sent out before us. There are also indications, very frightening, that we may see what we had left behind. Our grandchildren, great-grandchildren. We have to explain to our young sons the polarity of mother and father, what these terms really mean. They're not just terms. A mother is a special spiritual center that every child must have. A father is a special spiritual center that every child must have. When the mother passes the child from her soft, warm arms to the stronger arms of the father, the child must find love and security in both. When the father's key enters the door, when it hits the door, everyone inside should have a sigh of relief. I'm safe now. Anything that could have got me before, supernatural, jinn, bank robbers, anything, my dad is home. The mother teaches this to the child and her expressions when he comes home. Does she smile, hold the child closer, or does she push it aside and begin to rush around the house because something's not done? Biscuits aren't in the oven. Something's still on the floor. The mother is the child's first teacher, but she teaches him more than words, teaches him more than just Islam. She teaches him about a family unit, about respect, love, security. We must teach these things to our children ourselves because they're not being taught in all areas. We must take the responsibility and teach our children about the world in which they live. Geography, mathematics, the world in which they live. Where these things come from, where I come from. who your grandfather was. A great Muslim sage in Timbuktu said, a people who don't teach their children their own history is out of their mind.